So Larry's been working in the field of OD for nearly 50 years. He retired from the federal government Office of Personnel Management, where he was the Director of Organization Development and Chief of Employee Engagement. He was responsible for going to federal agencies throughout the US and helping them improve their organizations. Previous to that, he was a senior faculty member at the prestigious Federal Executive Institute in Charlotte, Virginia, where he was responsible for their OD consulting and custom programs. He was also one of 12 senior trainers and consultants for Franklin Covey for 11 years. He's been president of his own consultancy for over 30 years, working with both public and private sector and with large, intermediate, and small organizations. He conducted a meta-analysis of over 50 different OD models over a 2-year period and distilled the models into a simple yet highly effective approach to system analysis of organizations, which he'll be chatting about a bit. And Regan is the team lead of workforce planning and reshaping at the US Office of Personnel Management, providing OD and human capital management services to public sector clients nationwide. She previously served in the private sector in training and development positions, and across her federal career, she served in civilian positions with the Department of Army and Defense Logistics Agency. Both are authors of OD for the Accidental Practitioner, and they will be sharing OD Gone Bad. I will now turn it over to Larry and Regan.
Thank you, Tatum. Great introduction. Really appreciate that. And from Christine, who just put us in the chat, yes, we did have OD at OPM. Honestly, we did. So, hey, I appreciate
and still do.
Yeah, I know. We appreciate being here, and we wanted to do this live because A, that's what we're more comfortable with, and B, we figure that you can banter and chat with us, and we can respond as we go along. So again, thanks for everyone, and big shout out to Bill Rothwell as well. We met him at an OD gathering a couple of years ago, and he's been a constant friend and advisor. So thanks, Dr. Rothwell, appreciate it as well. So Regan and I met on doing organization development in the government sector, and we were working at the time with the Department of Labor, which turned out to be like a 3-year project, and we had many other projects since then, and including going overseas to other governments trying to install democracy in countries that weren't yet democratic. So it's been just a great learning experience. When you think about it, we go into all these organizations and we learn about their leadership, their culture, their problems, their operations. It's just been a tremendous educational experience for us to go to these places and learn about what's going on. So we also wanted to give you some ideas from being a practitioner and saying, well, we've seen lots of projects not go well. And then we ran across the following statistic. Regan, can you switch and move on? So this is from a report from McKinsey about why organization development efforts fail, and they said 70% fail. So let's take a look at that statistic because it's being touted a lot in the field, and I think it can be misleading. It's not that 70% fail totally. I think what the report said was that 70% fail to reach all of their objectives. But we don't know what percentage met 90 or 95% of their objectives. I mean, surely if some initiative met 90 or 95% of their objectives, most of us on this call would probably say, yeah, that's pretty successful. And what percent met only 20% or 30 or 40% of their objectives, where we might say, well, it wasn't that successful at all. Okay, so we just don't know. And how many of those projects were doomed to fail from the beginning? We don't know that either. I think what we can say comfortably is that many OD initiatives, when they get implemented in organizations or they tried to get implemented in organizations, are sub-optimized, that we're not reaching the full gain on it. So next. And I'm sorry, did we skip by objectives? We did.
Yeah, we did.
Would you go back and do that, please? I'm sorry.
That's all right, Larry. You were just on a really good roll. But
I know.
Yeah, it's totally fine. But yeah, in the essence of all of this, it's really, we just wanted to set the framework that why we're talking about this and what it means for you as a practitioner. And really it comes down to, as you engage in any client effort, there are indicators of the opportunities for success and failures along the way as early as your first engagement. And so we want to alert you to some of the things that you might see when you get into practicing OD that could allude to, hey, the success of this effort might be unlikely because I'm seeing X, Y, or Z. And what can you do at that point to mitigate it? And you just get that thought process started. There's often just some serious red flags you'll get along the way as well. And you want to be in tune with those. And really, it's because, one, you want to be influential as a practitioner and moderate the way in which you're approaching the effort with the client to make as much positive impact as you can, but also being realistic to recognize what's going on with the client or the situation that you have that they're asking you to influence, and know that sometimes it goes as far as saying, you know, maybe this is not the right relationship. This is not the partnership. This is not the client practitioner engagement that we should have at this time. And so as we talk through some of the ideas today, there's many other possibilities as to why change efforts might fail, but we want to talk to you about the ones we have outlined in this slide deck because they're pretty common and we've seen them in our own practice. And hopefully it just kind of gets you thinking about, oh, what could this look like in real life as I'm going into this field?
So again, many reasons why you know, organization processes fail, and there's no one common cause. I wish there was. We could identify, well, do this, do that. It would make it easier for all of us, but that's not the case. But we found out that over time we were seeing some of those same issues reoccur more and more. So some reasons appear more often than others, and that's why we're going to or what we're going to present to you today. Now, there's always a reason for why things are the way they are. So one of our wisdom bits in our book was, you know, all organizations are perfectly aligned to get the results they're getting. So when you think about that, the system is set up to produce the current results. And so when we go into an organization, we might look at, well, why is the organization failing to achieve its objectives? What systems are supporting that failure? And what systems might need to change to support a more successful one. So we want to give you a number of those reasons again about why some projects fail. So, Regan.
So one of the early things that happens when you work with clients in this arena is you get a phone call and they usually have a solution in mind is what it is. They'll call and say, oh, I really have some challenges with my leadership team. I need team building. Or, oh, I have some leaders who could learn to lead more effectively. I want to administer a 360, or go so far as I need a climate assessment for my organization. We need to know more about engagement. Well, all of those are solutions. They're not exactly a problem statement or giving you the root cause of what's happening. And so if we go with just those solutions and you administer team building, or you administer a training program, or you go ahead and do a survey of any kind, whether it's individual or a system-wide one, it's an event, right? And so then we just have, okay, you asked us for A, we gave you A, now what's next, okay? And what happens then is we're not influencing the system. We're just taking an assessment of some sort, or we're taking an action that just has a distinct beginning and an end point. OD, more often though, to be effective and to be everlasting and transformative, is a process. So instead of latching on to this, oh, let me have team building, I'm client A and I'm saying, please give me a team building event. That should be a first clue to say, okay, what's happening that says this is the solution for you? And dive a bit deeper and explain that, okay, maybe team building's a part of the process, but here's all the other things that might be a part of the transformative process you need to make the changes you're actually seeking. So one of the real critical early signals is asking for an event and expecting that to make long-term habitual change in the behaviors in an organization. But there's many others. So Larry, you want to, is this one still mine?
Keep going. Keep going.
All right. I forgot, I lost my slide numbers. Okay, so the other one, and this one I see often, especially serving in federal service where there are lots of constraints around resources. And that means the people and labor hours we can put towards things, just the general energy we can put towards a change effort, but as well as the time and the funding and the ability to commit on top of all the other activities that folks have, especially at the senior leader level. And as you often hear about in any sort of organizational narrative, is time and resource availability are generally constrained. So often clients will call and they'll say, you know what, I have $50,000. Can we change my culture? Right? That's really low, but I'm just saying it's a real low number. And you have to say, okay, I hear where you are with funds, but here's what it's really going to take. It's going to require a much bigger investment just financially, with not only maybe paying for external support, but also supporting the budget for the resources and labor hours you need internally, because the commitment piece, right, of internal change, if you only have the stakeholder who called you or one senior executive who's committed to the change, and there's a team of 10 folks who need to be committed to change, then we really might not have a realistic expectation that this will succeed. Because if that one person attrits, or if that one person cannot get the coalition behind them to say change is needed, then the investment of time and resources and other activities to support the change efforts probably won't come along with it. So as a practitioner, it's really important to tune into when you're hearing about those expectations, you know, how far they're trying to take the change initiatives and the availability of all the different resources, and determine what's feasible with what they have, and also tune the client into, okay, this is what you have and this is what we can likely achieve, but to really achieve what you're saying you'd like, we need to invest all of these other things in this process.
So what we find is that leadership is always part of the problem. Now, we don't say that in a negative way or to be blaming or finger pointing. It's just a matter of fact. It's like saying a square has four sides. Leadership, of course, is always part of the problem. Just look at it this way. What you tolerate, what you put up with, is what you end up with. So sometimes problems have been in organizations for years, and leadership will tell us, oh, we've been doing that for years. Well, okay, well, then we know that it's been tolerated for years, and that's why it's still here. Okay, because there was no extinguishing behavioral event to get rid of that behavior. So that's why the problem still exists today. So we tell senior leaders often that, of course, you're part of the problem. You know, it's just a natural thing. Now, let me give you the flip side of that. They're also always part of the solution, because it's not going to happen without them supporting the initiative. Now, I don't mean just verbally saying, yeah, we want to do A, B, and C. Okay. They'll all say that, especially if the senior person is in a room and a boss says, hey, I'd like to do A, B, and C. They're all going to go, yeah, great, let's do A, B, and C. And we tell them, hey, in 3 months, we're going to know whether you were serious about supporting A, B, and C. So it's not only supporting it verbally with your elevator speech, but it's supporting it behaviorally. Do they model what the change is they want to occur in their organization? And that's a tough one. You know, some senior leaders, you know, don't want it. We find sometimes when we go in an organization, there's the optimist, and they're really excited about doing things. There's the skeptic, and they're hopeful but doubtful. And then there's the cynic, okay, which is very doubtful and probably works to make sure that it fails. So skeptics and optimists are great because they balance each other, and they're both necessary and they're both important. Okay, cynics can be destructive to the process, and you know they need to either go along or go away, really, because they can harm the project. But upper management's important, and it's not where senior leadership can delegate this. Say, well, we'll give it to the HR person or the training and development person, or we'll give it to somebody else. Senior leadership has to be involved in the process of change. Now, our rule of thumb is that if you don't have 80% of the senior leaders on board, you may need to spend more time working with the senior leaders, turning those yellow lights or red lights into green lights, you know, than implementing it elsewhere in the organization. So that's our 80% concept that's talked about and developed a lot in the book, which, by the way, in the chat, somebody said, where can I buy it? You cannot buy it right now. The publisher has it. It's due out in March. So that's the earliest that'll be out. But again, that's talked about a lot, senior leadership's responsibility in a chapter of our book. Regan?
So another one that's tied into senior leadership often is shifting priorities. And it's not always just driven by a particular leader or a particular situation related to something that happened in an organization. We're living in an ecosystem in an organization. And so shifting priorities, consider yourself a ship at sea. Sometimes a sail gets damaged or changed directions. Sometimes you're in a storm. Sometimes it's a beautiful, smooth sea. Sometimes you've got a whole crowded port you're trying to navigate. There's any number of reasons that priorities can shift for an organization. And what's really integral is being in tune with that with your client, and also helping them conceptualize how does culture change and transformation and these initiatives they've asked for fit into those shifting priorities. The one thing that I think we can do that's very helpful for practitioners is create a scenario where your client can understand that you can work on behaviors, beliefs, cultures, norms embedded into while you work about business, right? You don't necessarily have to take your leaders to a team building retreat to create a team building scenario that also helps you execute on your business priorities. It's the practitioner who can craft that sort of approach that embeds the two and doesn't create this sort of separate but maybe equal or even unequal. Because one challenge that I've noticed with many leaders is when they have to choose between the priority of business and mission execution and priority of focusing and continuing a culture one, it almost always tips the scale towards business and mission. And then that sort of people engagement culture piece kind of goes by the wayside. And so to create the nexus where these things go hand in hand and helping create the culture that you're looking for, influencing the behaviors to be most effective, the relationships to be the most constructive they can be, are ultimately going to help you navigate the priorities, whether they're static or shifting at any point in time in an organization.
So if you don't change the organizational system, you won't change the behaviors. If you don't change the organizational system, it's unlikely that the initiative will be sustainable over the long haul. And you'll have another flavor of the month program that you implement. And it doesn't really give the organization the results that they were looking for, or maybe doesn't even address root cause. We find this part to be difficult in convincing senior leaders that their system, their policies, their practices, some of the ways they historically have done things in the past may now be part of the problem. What was a good solution 20 years ago may now be an impediment today. And looking at the organizational system, and there are core system elements, and then there are supporting system elements that support something. Again, I think I mentioned earlier, if you look at a system and say, what parts of the system support this current behavior, and what do we need to do to change it to get the ideal behavior? So when you get into system work, then you start looking at all the organizational elements and the pieces which are all interconnected. Sometimes, as an example, we can take a group and take a participant in the group and have them move their chair up by us. And it's no big deal. And many people think, well, hey, I accomplished the goal. I got this person to move. But conceptualize this. What if every chair in the room was tied together with a string? And now I wanted to move that person 10 feet away. I move the whole system. I impact the whole system if I have to do that. And that's what happens when we get into change in the organization. It's convincing senior leaders that, hey, maybe their systems need to change. Maybe their organization design needs to change. Maybe how they do things need to change. Maybe they themselves need to change as part of the system. So without changing the system, we're not likely to have sustainable change. There's other reasons still, a couple more.
Yeah, and the only thing I'll add to that is one thing that Larry and I muse on quite frequently is the top-down model as a system of organization structure and the influence it has on our relationships. It's something we definitely touch on the book, and it's something that you see increasingly talked about in org design. And I think that alone is one system that most organizations use as a way of aligning their work and behaviors. And we can really think about whether or not that's a positive, negative, or neutral influence on our overall outcomes as well.
And if you think changing the top-down model is difficult in corporate world, try changing it in the military. Yeah.
Yep. That's a long time process change.
Yes.
But another one, and I love this picture because I think one thing that you'll see and you'll experience at some point is a group of individuals when you're in a room like this, and they don't have their heads down, but they might as well, because they're either on their phones or laptops or writing a note or kind of just fiddling with a pen or something else, anything other than tuning into the message, right? But I think this is really a critical point, and it goes back to the commitment, and it goes back to the leadership, and it goes back to the buy-in comment, right? Like, if we need to affect change in an organization and they're calling a practitioner, there's some level of dependency on the practitioner initially to bring the change, right? They're telling us we need change and we want you to be a change agent. But we shouldn't want to be that forever for the organization. We should create a scenario where we're helping them change, we're facilitating the process, and eventually exiting out from the change. And in order to exit out, we have to create commitment and involvement from those in the organization who have to manage the change for the long term. And so when it's just, again, back to maybe one key stakeholder or one leader, it's very hard in an organization of 50, 60, 100, 150 people to get the commitment beyond that person to really make the change meaningful and lasting. So a lot of times to help this, we will encourage clients to get sort of a committee of folks who have an interest and believe in the change and want to support the culture change efforts. So a change committee, right? That committee could be any number of folks. It's always good to spread the wealth. You want a systems level approach, right? You don't want it always to just sit with leaders. We have to talk to the employees that are also impacted in facilitating the change. And so the more you can spread the wealth in terms of involving organization members as change agents, then the more involvement and the more commitment you'll see over time. And without that, again, it can just be one person leaves their position and the whole effort, it was built on a house of cards and it just goes by the wayside.
So we get this one quite a bit. It's not necessarily the wrong solution, but it might be a solution that will not give them all of the results that they're looking for. It's only a partial solution or it's inadequate. And we get people, again, when we get the first call, it's usually they provide us with either symptoms or solutions. And what do we do if we really think it's the wrong solution? What is the consultant's responsibility in speaking truth to power when you have to tell the executive, look, it's nice that you got 200,000 you want to spend on this initiative, but that's not going to get you the change that you're looking for, and that you're only putting a Band-Aid on a significant problem. And you haven't found what root cause is yet. So, and so we look at what are the responsibilities of the consultant to say, hey, this may not get you where you want to be. That's maybe more difficult for an internal consultant than it is for an external one, but it's still a difficulty when they want us to implement the wrong solution. And what if in your heart, you know it's wrong? Or what if you think there's some illegality to it or immorality to it? What if, because sometimes people will ask you to do things that are kind of shady. What do you do then? How do you approach that? What is your responsibility as a consultant? How do you say no to an organization if you're an external consultant and they're offering you a large sum of money to do a project will probably fail and not give them the results they want, but yet your income is dependent on these types of contracts. So this again is talked about in the book where we write about how do you handle when it's the wrong solution being requested or one is not going to be adequate to give them the results they want.
Oh, come on now. Here we go. So yeah, we've got about 5 minutes left. I certainly want to have any interactive Q&A if folks want to jump in, or if there's been some questions in the chat that we've not caught, let us know, certainly Tatum. But these are just the summary. These are the key points we talked about today. And as we talked about very early on, there's any number of challenges that could create fractures in the change process and the opportunities for success in a change program. And we saw some of you contribute those in the chat too, specifically around leadership involvement, engagement, and getting that coalition for change. It's certainly absolutely critical, right? If we're going to actually even start a process for across an organization, especially considering the systems we operate in are typically top down. So in terms of, considering these, again, this is just a reminder that as practitioners, we need to be in tune with these, and we need to consider how we can influence and adapt the process or relationship with our clients in a way that helps shift from moving towards a potential failure and into this is how we can create a successful change environment. And so, yes, our book's not out yet, but Larry and I are both on LinkedIn. We have our Accidental Practitioner Gmail account. You're welcome to reach out to us at any time. We'd love to connect. The book will be available for pre-order January 8th. And then we will have it fully printed March 8th is what the target is right now.
So thanks for having us at your conference, and we wish and hope the rest of it is great for you.
Thank you both so much. Time went quickly, but I think we all took a lot away in that brief 30 minutes. So we very much appreciate it.
Thank you, Tatum. Thanks. And Christina, thank you as well. It's all your chat.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I do have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Rahana, and what is usually the turnaround time once you're talking to leaders and you have the buy-in to start that process, or even just having that buy-in? What's that process like? Is it like a more of a, 30-day, 60-day, 90-day process, or do you have something within a time frame that you expect everybody to have the buy-in before you initiate the change or a plan or assess?
Well, and Regan can jump in too. It varies from group to group. We've often used the diagnostic model in OD as opposed to the dialogic model, and we believe in the interviews and focus groups and surveys and collecting current data. Because many times senior leaders will tell us, hey, we know our organization, they give us this perspective. And then we go down and ask the people, and it's a very different perspective. And senior leaders need to be aware that they have their perspective from their 60,000 foot view. But the people in the shop floor or wherever, they have a totally different perspective. And so then buy-in takes longer. And we've spent as much as 6 to 12 months just working with senior leaders to get absolute buy-in about what the issue is and what the potential solutions are, how much time, resource, energy, money they're going to devote towards this, et cetera. So it can be quite long. On the other hand, there are some groups that are fairly small, and the senior leaders are fairly well together, and we're pleasantly surprised. And in those cases, it might be 30 to 60 days and we can start implementing something, okay? But that's usually with smaller. Don't forget, in the federal government, we're sometimes dealing with organizations that have over 100,000 people. So that is a multi-system. We often teach in academia simple systems, but when you have 5 or 6 systems where people are from all over the globe and they have different cultures and different ways of doing things, then that just makes the whole issue far more complex. But usually getting buy-in takes a little bit of time. And I think so many consultants just take the project that's handed to them and implement. And because we're all part of regional OD groups and we hear this all the time. And it's like, well, how do you know that's what they need? Or how do you know that's the most important thing they should be doing? They'll ask us and say, we want to do team building. And yeah, can we do team building? Yeah, we can do team building, but how do you know you need it? Maybe it's just a very bad manager. Okay. And that's what it is. Okay. And we had one case where a manager thought everybody loved him and everything was great. We talked to the people and they all hated him. And we thought, well, are we being conned here or what's going on? And we went back and forth a number of times and this and that. And it ended up that the manager, it took us 6 months to figure this out. But, he wasn't lying. He was sincere. He was honest, and everybody else was honest, and they all wanted to quit and leave and all that other stuff. And yet the manager thought everything was good. And we gave him this feedback and he went back and talked to his people and he came back and said, everything's great. And everybody said, no, it's not great. It's worse than before. And he had Asperger's and he was just socially inept. And we never knew that. Okay. So those are the things that you uncover sometimes when you get into the diagnostic process, Regan.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Justine left, but she had a question in the chat about to what extent is seeking buy-in an OD approach. And I think, it's, oh, there you are. Oh, hi. Sorry, I didn't see your name down there.
I'm looking at an OD approach, which is premised on collaboration, involvement, participation. And I think buy-in is a bit unethical from an OD perspective. And a shift towards creating a sense of ownership is a more sustainable OD approach. So I was asking them to say to what extent is buy-in an OD approach, because it's like you're forcing ideas to say, this is the idea, we have taken a position, and buy into that particular idea.
So I wouldn't say that the OD practitioner has forced the buy-in. I think it's our job to facilitate the agreement amongst the client that this change is needed and we can create a vision for it. And so to some extent, the process of helping them self-obtain that buy-in as a group, if it's a group of leaders, is helping to facilitate the change in the organization. It's a diagnostic for the practitioner, right? Because we can see in that process, in facilitating that, how ready folks are for change, how many folks are really on board, how many skeptics, cynics, or optimists do we have, kind of what's the landscape for this change, and then advise, you know, our client, whoever the leader or POC is, kind of where we are in this process, right? Because where we can say, what we can say is, you know, there's limited buy-in if that's the case. And here's what that's going to lead to, right? If we continue through this process and we just kind of force the process. But if we can take a step back and we can help facilitate amongst the group of a client that here, let's try and get some more buy-in. Let's have more conversations about this. Let leaders in this organization discuss and concur and agree there's the nexus for moving forward, then we have a much higher chance of being successful with the investment of time and resources that they're likely going to need to make the change. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Great questions, you guys. Thank you.
Any other questions? I know you got other breakout rooms to go to and listen to some great folks.
There, William. Hi, William. Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you too. Thanks for the
Larry.
great talk.
Thank you. Thank you, William. Yeah. Well, we hope it's helpful to people. We're trying to give a practitioner's perspective, and you know, real world, it gets messy, it gets iterative, and there are a lot of challenges, constant changes. That's the norm, you know. So.
All right. I think you're all off to your breakout rooms. Thanks so much for your
Thank
time
you,
today.
everybody.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you.